The last type of congruence that we're going to look at is hypotenuse leg, and we're going to look at the proofs for that. Remember that hypotenuse leg is used solely for our right triangles. If it's not a right triangle, we cannot use hypotenuse leg. If it is a right triangle, we can say that if the hypotenuse and a leg of one right triangle is congruent to the hypotenuse and leg of another right triangle, then those triangles are congruent. So if we look at the picture to the left, that would be our hypotenuse as BC congruent to EF. Remember, the hypotenuse is across our right angle. And our leg, in this case with our picture, it would be AB is congruent to ED. Then we can say that our triangles ABC and DEF are congruent. If we look at a couple of proofs using hypotenuse leg, our given statements, the first one is that triangle LMP and triangle MNP are right triangles. And that is given, and that's a really important one. We cannot assume that it's a right triangle. We need that information so we know that we can mark our picture with that right angle. It also tells us that ML is congruent to MN. And when I mark that picture, we have our given statement. So with this, we know that we have right triangles and we know that we have our hypotenuses as congruent. We do have two triangles that are connected to each other, which means that the reflexive property might be helpful here. If we look, that actually gives us one of our legs as congruent. So we're going to say that MP is congruent to MP using that reflexive property. And now that we have that, we can say that triangle LMP is congruent to triangle NMP using hypotenuse leg. One more proof that we're going to look at with hypotenuse leg. Our given statement says that triangle WVX and triangle YZX are right triangles. So we're going to write that as our first statement, and our reason is given. And we're going to mark that in our picture with our right angles. They also told us that WV is congruent to YZ, so that is our second given statement, and we're going to mark that as well. The last given statement that they told us is that X is the midpoint of YW. When I write that out, again, it's a given. Remember that when they say that something is a midpoint, that gives us two congruent halves. So that tells me that WX and YX are congruent. And that's our definition of a midpoint. Looking at our picture, we can see that with our right triangles, we have our hypotenuses that are congruent, and we have a leg that is congruent. So we can say that triangle WVX is congruent to triangle YZX using hypotenuse leg. So again, that's just for our right triangles, but when we have a right triangle, it's a really easy way to prove that triangles are congruent.